Don't know what to say to that. That was wonderful, and I don't think I'm going to be able to follow that. So I'm going to talk really from a local authority point of view. My name's Judi Garrett, as you can see. My day job, they call me Service Development Manager. I tend to, every child who's referred to panel comes by my desk. So and when we talk about panel, we're talking about resources panel, children that come into care. My team administers all of those requests. So from my point of view, my day job goes from talking to senior managers about funding arrangements, but also looking at children that are coming in through the door, if you want to call it anything else. I just thought I'd start by giving you a bit of a national context. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but actually, there's a large number of children in care across the country, 71,000 at last count, and over the years, with funding reduction, early help has reduced in most authority areas. So the demand, and I'm sure local authorities here will know, the demand upon us is bigger than ever, and yet our resources are probably smaller than ever. So actually the spend last year on children's social care in terms of looked after children was 3.41 billion. So we're talking about a massive, massive industry. So I just wanted to give that a bit of a context. So we're quite a large authority. We've got nearly 1,100 children in our care. It's way over our statistical neighbours, so perhaps I'm not the most ideal person to be talking. But we do have a boarding programme, and we've had a boarding programme for almost 10 years. Our boarding programme started within education, and my colleague, I'm going to point to her, Sarah, is within education, and so she's worked on this programme much longer than I have. I'm pleased that she's here today with me. But actually I work in, I'm not sure whether I'm social care or not, I'm somewhere in between. So I do, I work within education and some in social care. In terms of our boarding programme, we have a budget. So our senior managers have given us a budget. It's £400,000 a year, of which 100,000 of it is from DSG and the rest is from children's social care. We've currently got 18 children in boarding schools, which is probably quite low for us actually, but that's where it is at the moment. We've got about 2 or 3 children that we're looking to place for September. So that gives you an idea. It's not a massive programme, but actually the figures over the years haven't really changed that much. Now Colin, when he asked me to speak today, set me a little bit of a challenge. How many children in the last 10 years have we placed? And I think it's 99. You said about 60, I think it's actually 99. It took me a little bit of work, but I managed to get that. So the cost of an average boarding placement is £18,000 for the authority per year. What I would say is only about a fifth of the children we consider for boarding actually take up boarding. Last financial year, only two of the 18 placements broke down. One of those children was taken into the care, and as part of that didn't attend boarding school. The other one, they were excluded. Okay, so that's about an 89% success rate. The minimum avoided costs of those placements for last year, and when I say minimum, I've used the smallest figure I could in terms of fostering and what would have happened for a period of time, was around 628,000. So there is savings to be made. From a local authority, I'm just thinking about your business case. That's where you need to think. What I would say though, this is a commitment, and you're talking a minimum commitment of at least 3 years. So you need to think about that, and it depends on the children, depends what age, and it depends when you place them. Yeah. So I was asked actually to do a bit of a checklist, which I really struggled with because it feels a bit like norm to me. So please ask me questions in case I've forgotten anything. Number one, you need senior management buy-in, and you need to get a budget. So what I would be saying is think about your business case if you've not already got boarding. But I would also think about starting it small. It's one child at a time. Don't think about, this isn't going to solve all your problems around placements. Don't think it will. It's just one thing of many things that you need to think about. You need to think about your governance arrangements, where your reporting is, what your procurement elements are. All those things need to be considered. Okay, we have a project structure. The boarding school sits beside independent schools in terms of SEN funding, but also social care. We have one contract that covers them all. We have one process in terms of that governance structure. The only thing that goes out of that process, in all fairness, is state-funded boarding. So if you've got any state-funded boarding, I'm going to put a little plug in your area, go and talk to them first. And I'm sorry about that for independence, but in reality, you know, we're talking about what works for children, and actually, and the funding element, you're going to save a lot of money if you've got state boarding around in your locality. I think it's really important that you know your schools, and you need to actually go there. You need to feel it, because what it looks like on paper and what it really is somewhere different. You know, I don't come from a boarding school background, you can probably tell. So for me, it was very different when I came into this. My day-to-day is around social care. I'm talking to children, I'm talking to social workers, I'm talking to social work managers. So for me, it is a big leap. Communications. This is the most important thing, if I'm honest. You need to think about your communications to social workers. I'm lucky enough, I talk to social work managers, social workers on a very, on a very regular basis. So I'm talking about this all the time. I don't know what your turnover of social workers are. Ours is huge. So to the point is, social work managers in teams, we keep a list, and sometimes, you know, one week to the next, we're not quite sure who's managing what team. That's the reality of social work. The turnover of social workers is high. Majority, you know, we've got large numbers that are agency staff as well. And I'm sure Norfolk isn't alone in that. Well, maybe we are, I don't know. So you need to think about communications. And I'll give you an example. Because I see children's cases on a daily basis, I get really saddened when I see parents saying, well, if you keep on doing that, I'm going to send you to boarding school. For me, it's a bit like, oh, how could we, you know, it almost stops us considering that child as a boarding school, and it's really sad. So some of this is about how you communicate to your social workers and how they then talk to families about that, and how they then talk to children about it. It's really about that selling process. Those are some of the things you're going to have to think about. It feels all a bit much at this moment if you're talking about 1 or 2 placements, but actually it becomes really norm. So that's why I struggle with with a checklist, because it's quite normal for me. But you do need to think about these things, because if you sell it wrongly, and the Catholic school and run by nuns, actually that could have been really quite dangerous. So you just need to think about it and selling it and making sure it's right for that child. So that's when I sort of talk about selection. We need to ensure that it's the right thing for that child. It needs to be sold to that child. That child needs to make that decision. They need to be part of that decision. Case management. I've talked really about case management because some of the things that trip us up are around case management. So if we place a child in a boarding school and they have a social worker, what if we then close the case? What does that mean in terms of who's going to manage that case should anything go wrong? Because that does happen. So do we keep it open to section 17, don't we? What are we going to do? So you just need to think about that. And remember, it's not it won't solve all your problems. So it's just one thing on your many things that you can deliver. Make sure you match well. I think it goes back to your point about making sure that it's something that you can call home, somewhere that is right for the child, something long term, something that will work for them. As placements get tighter and tighter, I think matching becomes an issue. This is no different than placing in a foster care. It needs to be right, it needs to work for everyone. You need to work with your schools around that as well, because some schools are different to others, and it's understanding what your school will take, and it's about we've got children placed in about 6 or 7 schools. And they're different, and they will take different children. So it's about thinking what would suit that child, and what would work. But you need to understand that from the school's perspective. So you need to talk to them about that, and you need to be, when you're considering a child, as early as you possibly can, start talking to that school. We're not always very good at that, if I'm honest, because often time is an element. So I may see a child today, and we'll be thinking, how quickly can we get that? How can we get that child in for September? Can we get that child in for next week? That's the sort of pace we have to work at. Agree practicalities, and I've said this because these are the things that trip us up at the end, and when it happens throughout. So the child goes on a trip, and you get a bill through. I'm sure we all get these from foster carers or whatever, and we're like, we hadn't thought about that, and we've got this bill and nobody wants to pay it. And think about those sorts of things up front. So you need to agree some things, some practicalities with the family, but you also need to agree that internally, and the schools need to understand that too. So we need to have that open discussion. Uniform, not always, but uniforms often are more expensive than perhaps normal schools. Those sorts of things do come up, so we just need to think about that. Also think about it from the child's perspective. It's one child at a time. We're not going to set up this big programme that everybody can go through. Actually, this is about, this would work for Johnny because... So you need to think about your processes in terms of finding those children. In terms of outcomes, I'm sort of repeating really. Structure, routine and aspiration keep coming back, and they're the sorts of things we get feedback, but both from families but also from children themselves. Self-esteem, self-worth, those sorts of things improve it dramatically. Education attainment, I think that really works well for these children. Often these children in the same circumstance that you were talking about haven't been really attending school for a number of quite a while, or if they've attended, haven't really engaged. What works really well is about actually the child still being part of a family and a community. Maybe not all the time, but they've got that structure and routine at school, and then actually at home it may not be quite as structured and routine, but actually they're still part of the family, and they do have higher aspirations. If I whiz through that quick enough.